Good evening, everybody. This time I'm speaking to you in front of my phone instead of in front of my computer. We'll see how this goes. I thought this might be a little easier setup. But I spoke to you at some length a couple of evenings ago about the gift that the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron has been in my life, how it's been transformative, how I believe it can be the exact same impact on your life as well. It's just that powerful a book, and the practices that Julia Cameron encourages are that powerful, that transformative. And I talked at length about what I do every morning, how I write morning pages in my journal. Well, today I want to talk to you about what I do every evening. So these two practices, my morning practice and my evening practice, they're like parentheses. In between those parentheses, everything happens, right? My daily life happens. I get up in the morning, walk the dogs, sit, write morning pages. Now, I walk the dogs, their last little excursion outside at night, get myself ready for bed, get my water. What's the last thing I do before I actually get in bed and kiss Pete and the doggies goodnight and turn out my light? Well, the last thing I do is gratitude journaling. That's what I want to talk to you about briefly today. That same friend, the friend who gave me The Artist's Way when I was sick with pneumonia, that friend, fast forward about a year. So I'd read The Artist's Way, begun my morning journaling practice, was being faithful to that. Things were difficult in the extended family. Pete's sisters had been ill. One had passed. The other, as it turns out, was more seriously ill than we knew. She would pass also. So it was a tumultuous time, a time of great grief. There was a lot going on with the extended family at the time. The family was imploding in some ways. And I was regularly talking to this friend and telling her bluntly how terrible everything was. A litany every day, pretty much, because we talked a lot. And so, bless her heart, she listened, and it was pretty much the same old, different day. Things are terrible. This is what's happening today. And so on one of those days, God bless her, I guess she maybe had had enough. And she said to me, Eve, I know you're doing your morning pages. I want you to do something else for me, something in addition, not besides morning pages, but in addition to morning pages, not instead of, I should say, but in addition to. She said, I want you to get a little notebook, the kind you write grocery store lists in, maybe. Little notebook. I like little notebooks. I use big notebooks for my my gratitude. I use big journals for my morning pages. I use big to big journals for my art journaling, which I'll talk about in another video, maybe the next one. But she said, get yourself a little notebook. And at the end of every day, she said, write down 10 things that you're grateful for. Now, I gotta tell you, if I'm gonna be honest here, my initial reaction wasn't, oh, goody, this sounds like fun, 10 things I'm grateful for. Not even. My initial reaction was, are you not even listening to me? That's what I wanted to say on the phone. Oh, have you not been paying attention? Things are awful. She knew that. She knew things were awful. That's why, and that's when she pulled this particular tool out of her toolbox to share with me. And here's what she said. Eve, you already know how awful everything is. And you're right. Things are tough right now. Tough personally, tough for people you love with your whole heart. Things are hard. But here's the key. She said this. She said, but I promise you, there's still beauty, there's still joy. And in the words of a more recent commercial, hadn't been thought of back when she first told me about gratitude journaling, she could have said, Eve, there's a wonder in life you've gone nose blind to. Can't smell it, can't see it, can't hear it, can't feel it. She said, if you will take a few minutes at the end of every single day and write down 10 things from that day's lived experience that you're grateful for, this will be as transformative for you as morning pages are becoming. Honestly, I didn't see it. I didn't even believe it. But I trusted her, and I trusted her love of me. And I trusted her love of my family. So she wasn't being flippant at all in giving me this advice. And so, being the obedient friend I am, I went out and I got myself, little notebooks. She also said this. She said, don't be surprised after you've numbered your page from 1 to 10, if you run out of things to say thank you for way before 10. You might get to 4 or 5 and run out of steam. That's okay. Keep going. And then the next day, 10 more. She said, don't just write down the big ticket things. Of course, you're grateful for a roof over your head. Of course, you're grateful for Pete and his love in your life. She said, you don't have to write a paragraph. You can be wordy, she said. She knows me really well. I can be wordy, right? She said, simple little phrases of specific details in your life that you can honestly say you're grateful for. So, I began reluctantly at first. And then it kind of turned into a game. I began to be more aware in my daily life of serendipities, synchronicities, surprises, happy little things that in my attitude before this little notebook, I might have skipped right over like a stone skipping over a pond, barely noticing, barely lighting down, barely touching. But knowing I had this list I had to do before I could turn out my light and go to bed every night, that made me stop and think. It was a gift of attention, deliberate, focused attention in my life. So I just want to read you some examples from one of these earlier journals. This one comes about, 18 years ago, maybe 17 years ago. Here's some things I decided I was grateful for that day. This is, again, years before we bought the gallery, or I took photography up again in a serious way. The very first item on my list that day was a visit with my son, with Jason. The second entry says photographs. The third says Michael hugs. Now, Michael's my grandson in his mid-20s now, on his own, living in Pennsylvania. At that point, all those years ago, He was something like 7 or 8 or 9 years old. He must have been here for his summer vacation, because somehow in the third week of July that year, that summer, when I first began this practice, I'd had a visit with Jason and a hug from grandson Michael, Faith's son, all in the same incredible day. That's a lot to be grateful for. But they weren't just huge, big-ticket kinds of items like that, once in a blue moon sorts of items that made my list. Listen to what else is on the list from that day. Cranberry juice. Trying different eating habits. Wing feathers. I must have found feathers, maybe out on the beach that day. A few days later, the courage to encourage someone else. That made my list that day. Progress on the journal I was working on for school. I'd gone back to college in midlife, and let me tell you, that was a challenge and a joy, and in some ways a struggle. The Naturalist website I found. Live music at the Outer Banks Opry. This was an era when a couple of Ocracoke musicians gathered their musician friends and began coming north and playing up this end of the beach in school, actually, in one of the schools on Friday or Saturday night. This is kind of funny. In August, that summer, I wrote down grains as one of the gifts I was grateful for. I went gluten-free, now it's probably 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago maybe. So wheat no longer makes my list, but rice sure does. Here we go. Also from August, the courage to tell the truth. A small brown feather. The presence of Chessie, our Kazan dog, long past now, and Timba, a stripy orange kitty, also long past, in my daily life. Morning bird song. Cool breezes. It's a hot August day. Colorful flowers. Little notebook. This year, for Christmas, that same friend who lives in Connecticut sent me 3 of these, bigger notebooks. Her thought was I could use them for field notes as I photograph, but I told her the very first one of these 3 is going to become this year's gratitude journal. And I began it when my other notebook ran out on the 29th of January. Tonight I'm grateful, 1, for this new gratitude journal. 2, Netflix choices. 3, a good haircut. 4, a check for calendar sales. 5, everyone seems pleased with my choices. Honestly, I'm not even sure what that means today. Choices, this is a month after Christmas. Oh, I do know what this is. My choices of inventory for the shop. Inventory that now, for the most part, in this time of pandemic, with our shop being closed, I've mostly postponed or canceled. Downloading pictures from Pennsylvania. Rosie, our little rescue Westie, getting braver every day. this is what my lists look like. Not just one word anymore, usually little phrases. February 11th. Tonight I am grateful, here's just a few, for my new Western and Native American art magazines, for reliving some of our travels out west via Pete's pictures, which are still on my computer, for finding the old lion pottery vase my mother gave me decades ago in the tool shed, for the first daffodils that bloomed yesterday. Gratitude. I highly recommend, particularly in these tough times, that you get yourself a little notebook, or make yourself a little notebook. At the end of every day's experience, even though the days seem routine, boring, endless, for some of you perhaps exhausting, terrifying, stressful, I'm going to tell you what my dear friend Karen told me all those years ago. I promise you that your daily lived life holds moments of beauty, joy, happy surprises you may well have gone nose blind to. Gratitude will open your eyes and your heart to the beauty that still is around you, just waiting for you to notice. And right here, say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Till next time.